Chapter 1. The Ice King's Domain, the 42nd floor of the Blackwood. Technology's tower pierced the Manhattan skyline like a gleaming steel needle. Inside the executive suite, Gabriel Blackwood stood silhouetted against floor-to-ceiling windows, his reflection a dark specter against the city sprawling below. At 32, he commanded an empire worth $12 billion. Yet his expression held all the warmth of a winter storm. His tailored charcoal suit fit like armor, every line precise and unforgiving. Dark hair swept back without a strand out of place, steel gray eyes that missed nothing, and a jaw that looked carved from granite completed the picture of corporate perfection. The tech world knew him as the Ice King, a man who had built his fortune on ruthless decisions and emotional detachment. Gabriel checked his platinum watch with mechanical precision. His new personal assistant was late by exactly 3 minutes and 27 seconds. In his world, time was money, and money was power. Tardiness was a cardinal sin that suggested weakness, and Gabriel Blackwood had no tolerance for weakness. The intercom buzzed with his current assistant's nervous voice. "Mr. Blackwood, your new personal assistant has arrived. Should I send her up?" "Send her in," Gabriel replied, his tone as cold as Arctic wind. He remained facing the window, a deliberate power play he had perfected over the years. First impressions mattered, and he intended to establish dominance from the very beginning. The sound of heels clicking against marble announced the arrival of his newest employee. Gabriel had reviewed her resume the night before. Rosalie Harper, 26 years old, bachelor's degree in business administration, previous experience as an executive assistant at a mid-level marketing firm. Nothing spectacular, nothing that stood out. Just another replaceable cog in his corporate machine. "Mr. Blackwood." The voice was softer than he had expected, with a slight tremor that suggested nervousness, but not fear. There was something musical about it, like wind chimes on a summer breeze. Gabriel turned slowly, prepared to deliver his standard intimidation speech about expectations and consequences. The words died in his throat. Standing before him was the most captivating woman he had ever seen. Auburn hair cascaded in gentle waves past her shoulders, catching the morning light streaming through the windows. Her dress was professional, but couldn't hide the graceful curve of her figure. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold. They were the color of emeralds touched by sunlight, alive with intelligence, and something else he couldn't quite identify. Defiance, perhaps. "You're late," Gabriel managed, his voice rougher than intended. Rosalie lifted her chin slightly, meeting his gaze without flinching. 3 minutes and 34 seconds, to be precise. The elevator was delayed on the 28th floor due to a maintenance issue. The response surprised him. Most people cowered under his stare, offering stammering apologies and excuses. This woman corrected his timing and provided a logical explanation without a hint of submission in her tone. "Harper, in my company, punctuality isn't optional." Gabriel moved to his desk, a massive piece of black granite that served as both workspace and barrier. "Your predecessor lasted exactly 6 weeks before deciding she couldn't handle the demands of working for me. What makes you think you'll be different?" Chapter 2. First impressions and hidden strength. Slash studied the man before her with artists, eyes seeing beyond the carefully constructed facade. Yes, he was intimidating. The sharp angles of his face, the way he held himself like a coiled spring ready to strike, the aura of barely contained power that surrounded him like an invisible force field. But she had learned to read people through years of struggle, and beneath his icy exterior, she glimpsed something unexpected. Pain, loneliness, a soul as carefully armored as his body. "With respect, Mr. Blackwood," she said, her voice steady despite the butterflies dancing in her stomach. "I'm not your predecessor. I'm here because I need this job, and I'm very good at what I do. If you're looking for someone to intimidate or manipulate, you might want to reconsider your hiring process." Gabriel's eyebrows rose slightly. In 15 years of running his company, no assistant had ever spoken to him with such directness. Most trembled under his gaze, eager to please and terrified of making mistakes. This woman stood her ground like she was carved from the same granite as his desk. Bold words for someone whose previous employer's company went bankrupt 6 months after you left, Gabriel said, testing her further. He had done his research naturally. Morrison Marketing failed. Because they refused to adapt to digital transformation, Rosalie replied without missing a beat. I tried to warn them for 2 years that their traditional advertising model was becoming obsolete. They chose not to listen. That's not a reflection of my abilities. It's a reflection of their stubbornness. Gabriel moved around the desk, closing the distance between them. He was tall, easily 6 feet 3 inches, and he used his height as another tool of intimidation. Most people stepped back when he invaded their personal space. Rosalie held her ground, tilting her head back to maintain eye contact. Your resume says you have a degree in business administration, Gabriel said, his voice dropping to that dangerously soft tone that made board members sweat. But your college transcripts show you actually started in fine arts. Why the change? For the first time, Rosalie's composure flickered. A shadow crossed her features, and her hands clenched almost imperceptibly at her sides. Dreams don't pay. Rent, Mr. Blackwood. I needed a practical career. There was a story there, Gabriel realized. Pain buried beneath pragmatism. It intrigued him in a way nothing had for years. Made a mental note to investigate further. Your salary will be $75,000 annually, Gabriel said, returning to his desk. You'll work a minimum of 50 hours per week, sometimes more. You'll manage my calendar, screen my calls, prepare my meetings, and handle confidential correspondence. You'll travel when I travel, which is often. You'll be available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Any questions? Just one, Rosalie said. Why did you really hire me? The question caught Gabriel off guard. I beg your pardon? Your previous assistant lasted 6 weeks? The one before her lasted 8. I did my research too, Mr. Blackwood. You've gone through 12 personal assistants in 3 years. Your reputation for being difficult precedes you. So why did you choose someone from a failed marketing company when you could have hired from any number of prestigious firms? Gabriel stared at her for a long moment. The truth was, he wasn't entirely sure himself. Something about her resume had stood out, something he couldn't quite articulate. Perhaps it was the gap between her artistic education and her practical career choice. Perhaps it was the way her reference letters praised her creativity alongside her efficiency. Or perhaps it was simply instinct, the same instinct that had built his empire. Because, Gabriel said finally, I believe in potential, I suspect. You have more of it than you've shown the world. Chapter 3. The Dance of Power and Vulnerability. The first week passed in a blur of meetings, phone calls, and carefully orchestrated power plays. Rosalie quickly proved herself capable of handling Gabriel's demanding schedule with an efficiency that impressed even him. She anticipated his needs before he voiced them, organized his chaos with artistic precision, dealt with difficult clients and suppliers with a diplomatic skill he hadn't expected, but it was the small moments that intrigued Gabriel most. The way she arranged flowers in the reception area, turning a sterile corporate space into something almost warm. How she reorganized his filing system not just for efficiency, but with an aesthetic sensibility that made even mundane documents pleasing to review. The careful way she selected his lunch options, somehow knowing he preferred substance over style without ever asking. Miss Harper, Gabriel said on Friday afternoon, studying the calendar she had prepared for the following week. This is remarkable. Work, Rosalie looked up from her computer, surprise flickering across her features. Compliments from Gabriel Blackwood were rarer than snow in July. It's color-coded by priority level and meeting type, she explained. Red for critical business decisions, blue for routine check-ins, green for creative development sessions, and yellow for personal appointments. I also included travel time calculations and buffer periods for unexpected delays. Gabriel studied the calendar more closely. It wasn't just organized. It was beautiful. The colors flowed together like a carefully planned painting. Each appointment positioned with an artist's eye for balance and harmony. Where did you learn to do this? Gabriel asked. Do what? Rosalie seemed genuinely puzzled by the question. Make something ordinary into something more. A flush of pink colored her cheeks, and she looked down at her hands. I don't know what you mean, Mr. Blackwood. It's just a calendar. But it wasn't just a calendar, and they both knew it. It was art disguised as administration, beauty hidden. In the mundane details of corporate life, Gabriel found himself studying other things Rosalie had touched during the week. The way she arranged his desk accessories, the subtle improvement in the office lighting after she adjusted the blinds. Even the manner in which she sorted his mail seemed to follow some invisible aesthetic principle. Miss Harper, Gabriel said, his voice softer than usual. Would you join me for dinner tonight? To discuss the Morrison account? He added quickly, as if the afterthought would make the invitation seem purely professional. Rosalie's green eyes widened. In the corporate world, dinner invitations from the boss walked a fine line between professional courtesy and personal interest, especially when that boss was Gabriel Blackwood, a man whose romantic life was as closely guarded as state secrets. I don't think that would be appropriate, Mr. Blackwood, Rosalie said carefully. I'm not asking you on a date, Miss Harper, Gabriel replied, though something in his tone suggested otherwise. I'm asking you to join me for a business dinner. There's a difference, is there? Rosalie challenged, surprising them both with her directness. Gabriel stood and moved to the window, his favorite refuge when conversations ventured into uncomfortable territory. The setting sun painted Manhattan in shades of gold and crimson, a daily masterpiece that usually failed to move him. Today, however, he found himself seeing it with new eyes, wondering how Rosalie would capture such beauty if she still painted. Perhaps not, Gabriel admitted quietly. But I find myself curious about you, Miss Harper. You're not what I expected. And what did you expect? Gabriel turned back to face her, and for a moment his carefully maintained composure slipped. Someone ordinary. Someone forgettable. Someone who would do the job and remain invisible. I'm sorry to disappoint you. You haven't disappointed me, Gabriel said, and the admission seemed to surprise him as much as it did her. Quite the opposite, actually. Chapter 4. The Crack in the Ice. The following. Monday brought unexpected challenges that would test both Gabriel's legendary self-control and Rosalie's hidden strengths. A major client, Harrison Industries, threatened to pull a $50 million contract after a competitor offered them a better deal. The morning was spent in frantic phone calls and emergency meetings, with Gabriel's temper growing shorter by the hour. Get Harrison on the phone, Gabriel barked as he paced his office like a caged tiger. Find out everything you can about Meridian Tech's offer. I want to know what we're up against. Rosalie worked with quiet efficiency, making calls and gathering intelligence while Gabriel raged against what he saw as corporate betrayal. By noon, she had compiled a comprehensive report on Meridian Tech's proposal and Harrison Industries' financial situation. Mr. Blackwood, she said, entering his office with a folder in hand. I have the information you requested. Gabriel snatched the folder and began reading, his frown deepening with each page. They're offering 15% below our price. How the hell did they manage that? They're cutting corners, Rosalie said simply. Look at page 3. Their proposed timeline is unrealistic, and their quality assurance protocols are minimal compared to ours. They're essentially promising the impossible to win the contract. Gabriel looked up at her sharply. How do you know about quality assurance? Protocols. Rosalie hesitated, realizing she had revealed more knowledge than a typical personal assistant should possess. I pick things up quickly, Miss Harper, Gabriel said, setting the folder aside and giving her his full attention.
What?
Aren't you telling me? Before Rosalie could respond, Gabriel's phone rang. It was James Harrison himself, and the conversation that followed would change everything. Harrison, Gabriel answered, his voice clipped with barely contained anger. Gabriel, I'm calling to give you one last chance to match Meridian's offer. Harrison's voice crackled through the speaker. Otherwise, I'm signing with them this afternoon. Gabriel's grip on the phone tightened. James, you know as well as I do that their timeline is unrealistic.
What?
They're promising you the moon with no way to deliver? That's their problem, Harrison replied coldly. I'm running a business, not a charity. If you can't compete, I'll find someone who can. Gabriel opened his mouth to respond with his usual corporate hardball tactics, but Rosalie stepped forward and did something unprecedented. She gestured for the phone, her green eyes blazing with determination, against every instinct. Gabriel handed her the receiver. "Mr. Harrison," Rosalie said, her voice warm but authoritative. "This is Rosalie Harper, Mr. Blackwood's assistant. I've been reviewing your company's recent expansion into the Southeast market. I believe there's something you should consider before making this decision." Gabriel stared at her in shock. No assistant had ever taken control of a client call without permission. It was corporate suicide. "Miss Harper, I presume." Harrison's tone was amused, but cautious. "What could you possibly tell me that your boss hasn't already tried?" Iridian Tech's proposed system uses outdated integration protocols, Rosalie said, consulting notes she had apparently prepared while listening to the conversation. "Your new Southeast operations use the Henderson-Clark platform, which requires specific compatibility standards. Iridian's system will require a complete infrastructure overhaul at your end, costing approximately $2.3 million. In additional expenses, Blackwood's system integrates seamlessly with Henderson-Clark, saving you both time and money." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for nearly 30 seconds. Gabriel watched Rosalie with growing amazement, realizing he was witnessing something remarkable. "How did you know about our Southeast systems?" Harrison asked, his voice no longer dismissive. "I make it my business to understand our clients' needs," Rosalie replied smoothly. "Mr. Blackwood's success depends on your success, and that means paying attention to details others might miss." Another pause, then Harrison's laughter filled the office. "Miss Harper, you should be running your own company. Where did Gabriel find you?" "He found me when I needed finding," Rosalie said, glancing at Gabriel with something that looked dangerously close to affection, "and I intend to prove worthy of that faith." Gabriel felt something shift inside his chest, a warmth spreading through the ice that had encased his heart for years. This woman, this mysterious, extraordinary woman, had just saved his biggest contract with knowledge and insight that went far beyond her job description. "All right," Harrison said finally. "You've got my attention. Send me the technical specifications for the Henderson-Clark integration, and we'll stick with Blackwood Technologies." When Rosalie hung up the phone, the office fell silent except for the soft hum of the air conditioning. Gabriel stood frozen, staring at her as if seeing her for the first time. "Where did you learn about integration protocols?" Gabriel asked quietly. Rosalie's composure finally cracked. Her shoulders sagged slightly, and she sank into the chair across from his desk. "My father," she whispered. "Before he died, he was a systems engineer. I grew up listening to him talk about technology, about the importance of compatibility and integration. I never thought I'd need that knowledge until today." Gabriel moved around the desk and, in an unprecedented gesture, placed his hand gently on her shoulder. The touch sent electricity through both of them. "Thank you," Gabriel said, his voice rougher than usual. "You just saved my company $50 million. Rosalie looked up at him, tears glistening in her green eyes. "Your company means everything to you, doesn't it?" Gabriel studied her face, seeing past the professional mask to the vulnerable woman beneath. "It used to," he said softly. "Lately, I'm not so sure." The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken possibilities. Gabriel found himself wanting to know everything about her, her father, her abandoned art career, the pain she carried. Like a secret burden. Wanted to understand what had brought such an extraordinary woman into his sterile corporate world. But before either could speak, the office door burst open, and Gabriel's world shifted on its axis for the second time. That day, well, said a voice Gabriel recognized with cold dread. "Isn't this touching?" Standing in the doorway was Richard Blackwood, Gabriel's uncle, and the one man who had the power to destroy everything Gabriel had built. And from the predatory smile on Richard's face, it was clear he had been watching their intimate moment. With great interest, the game was about to change. And neither Gabriel nor Rosalie understood just how high the stakes had become. Chapter 5. The uncle's Weberchard Blackwood entered Gabriel's office like a shark scenting blood in the water. At 58, he possessed the same sharp features as his nephew, but none of Gabriel's restrained control, for Gabriel was ice. Richard was fire-run predictable, destructive, and always seeking to consume whatever stood in his path. "Uncle Richard," Gabriel said, his voice carefully neutral as he stepped away from Rosalie. "I wasn't expecting you." "Clearly," Richard replied, his predatory gaze shifting between Gabriel and Rosalie with obvious calculation. Hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Rosalie rose from her chair, instinctively recognizing the danger this man represented. There was something in his cold blue eyes that reminded her of winter storms, beautiful from a distance but deadly up close. "This is my personal assistant, Rosalie Harper," Gabriel said, moving to place himself subtly between his uncle and Rosalie. "Miss Harper, my uncle Richard Blackwood, board member and minority shareholder." "A pleasure," Richard said, extending his hand to Rosalie with a smile that never reached his eyes. "Though I must say, Gabriel, your taste in assistance has certainly improved." Rosalie shook his hand briefly, suppressing a shudder at the contact. His grip lingered just long enough to be inappropriate, and she saw Gabriel's jaw tighten in response. "What brings you here, Richard?" Gabriel asked, his tone suggesting his uncle's presence was anything but welcome. "Business, naturally," Richard replied, settling into Gabriel's leather guest chair without invitation. "I've been hearing interesting rumors about Blackwood Technologies' expansion into artificial intelligence. As a board member, I feel I should be better informed about our company's new directions." Gabriel's expression remained impassive, but Rosalie caught the slight tension in his shoulders. There was history here, she realized, and none of it good. "The AI division is in preliminary development," Gabriel said carefully. "Nothing has been finalized. But preliminary development requires significant investment," Richard continued, his tone conversational but his eyes sharp with interest. "Investment that requires board approval for amounts over $10 million? Funny thing is, I don't recall seeing any proposals cross my desk." The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a fire. Rosalie found herself holding her breath, sensing she was witnessing something far more dangerous than a simple family disagreement. "The proposals will be submitted when the development phase is complete," Gabriel replied. Richard's smile widened, and Rosalie felt a chill run down her spine. "Of course they will. You've always been so thorough with protocol, Gabriel, just like your father." The mention of Gabriel's father hit its target. Rosalie saw something flicker across Gabriel's features: pain, anger, or perhaps both. "Harper," Gabriel said suddenly, his voice tight with controlled emotion, "would you please reschedule my 3 o'clock meeting? I believe my uncle and I have family matters to discuss." Rosalie nodded, understanding the dismissal for what it was: protection. Gabriel was shielding her from whatever storm was about to break between the two men. "Of course, Mr. Blackwood," she said, gathering her files. As she reached the door, she heard Richard's voice, low and menacing. "Such a lovely girl, Gabriel. I do hope you're not repeating your father's mistakes." Chapter 6. Secrets and Shadows Later. That evening, Rosalie sat in her small studio apartment, trying to make sense of the day's events. The encounter with Richard Blackwood had left her unsettled, not just because of his obvious hostility toward Gabriel, but because of the way Gabriel had reacted to his uncle's presence. She had spent the afternoon researching Richard Blackwood, using her access to the company database and various public records. What she found painted a picture of a man who had spent decades living in his older brother's shadow. Watching as David Blackwood built the technology company that Richard felt should have been partially his, the tragedy was well documented in business journals. David Blackwood's death in a car accident 5 years ago had left Gabriel, then only 27, in control of a billion-dollar company. Richard, as David's younger brother and minority shareholder, had expected to play a larger role in the company's leadership. Instead, Gabriel had systematically excluded him from major decisions, treating him as nothing more than a necessary evil on the board of directors. But it was Richard's financial situation that worried Rosalie most. Despite his stake in Blackwood Technologies, he was heavily in debt due to failed investments and an expensive lifestyle. Men with nothing to lose, Rosalie knew from bitter experience, were capable of anything. Her phone buzzed with an incoming text message. "Gabriel. Are you all right?" Gee, the simple question made her heart skip. In all her previous jobs, no employer had ever checked on her well-being after a difficult day. "I'm fine. Are you?" The response came quickly. "Can we talk?" "Not about business." Rosalie stared at the message for a long moment. Every professional instinct told her to maintain boundaries, to keep their relationship strictly business. But something in those 4 words, "not about business," suggested Gabriel needed something more than a professional conversation. My apartment. 47 West 84th Street, App 3B. She immediately regretted the impulse. Inviting her billionaire boss to her tiny studio apartment seemed like crossing a line she couldn't uncross. But before she could send a follow-up message, withdrawing the invitation, another text appeared. "Thank you. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Chapter 7. The truth between them. Gabriel stood outside Rosalie's apartment building, questioning every decision that had led him to this moment. In his 32 years, he had never visited an employee's home for any reason. He maintained strict boundaries between his professional and personal life, practice that had served him well in business, but left him isolated in every other aspect of his existence. The building was older, but well-maintained. The kind of pre-war structure that possessed character despite its modest circumstances. Gabriel found himself wondering what Rosalie's apartment would reveal about the woman who would become such an enigma in his ordered life. She answered the door wearing jeans and a soft green sweater that brought out the color of her eyes. Without the armor of professional attire, she looked younger, more vulnerable, and somehow even more beautiful. "This is probably a terrible idea," Rosalie said by way of greeting, stepping aside to let him enter. "Probably," Gabriel agreed, but he stepped inside anyway. The apartment was small, but transformed by Rosalie's artistic sensibility. Every inch of space had been utilized with careful consideration, creating an environment that felt spacious despite its limitations. But it was the walls that captured Gabriel's attention immediately. They were covered with paintings, landscapes, portraits, abstract pieces that seemed to pulse with emotion and life. The work was extraordinary, displaying a talent that went far beyond hobby or casual interest. "You painted these," Gabriel said, though it wasn't really a question. Rosalie nodded, her cheeks flushing with a mixture of pride and embarrassment. "It's what I do when I can't sleep, which is most nights lately." Gabriel moved through the small space like a man in a gallery, studying each piece with the intensity he usually reserved for quarterly reports. The paintings revealed layers of emotion and skill that took his breath away. "Why did you stop?" Gabriel asked, pausing before a particularly striking piece of cityscape of New York at dawn. Painted with such precision and feeling that it seemed to glow from within. "I told you, dreams don't pay rent. That's not the real reason." Rosalie was quiet for so long that Gabriel thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "My father believed in my talent. He worked double shifts at the engineering firm to pay for art school, never complained about the expense or questioned whether I was wasting his money. He said art was the soul of civilization, that without it, we were just machines going through motions." Gabriel turned from the painting to face her, seeing tears gathering in her green eyes. "He died during my senior year," Rosalie continued. "Heart attack at his desk, working late again to cover my tuition. I found out afterward that he had taken out a second mortgage on the house to pay for my education. After the funeral, I realized I couldn't continue. I owed it to his memory to be practical, to build a stable life, to honor his sacrifice with something more than dreams and paint." Gabriel felt something crack inside his chest. The story explained so much: her hidden knowledge of technical systems, her artistic eye applied to mundane tasks, the sadness he sometimes glimpsed beneath her professional composure. "He would be proud of what you've accomplished," Gabriel said softly. "Would he?" Rosalie laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "I'm a personal assistant who paints in her spare time and can barely afford rent on a studio apartment. Not exactly the success story he died for." Gabriel moved closer, close enough to see the gold flecks in her green eyes, close enough to catch the faint scent of her perfume mixed with turpentine and hope. "You saved my company $50 million today," Gabriel said. "You saw solutions that my entire executive team missed. You have a gift that goes beyond art or business. You see connections others can't see, possibilities others overlook. That's not failure, Rosalie. That's extraordinary." The way he said her name, with such gentleness and certainty, made her breath catch. For a moment, they stood suspended in the space between professional courtesy and personal intimacy, both aware they were approaching a point of no return. "Gabriel," Rosalie whispered. And the sound of his first name on her lips broke the last of his restraint. He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized she was crying. I came here to apologize for putting you in an awkward position with my uncle. I came to make sure you were all right. But standing here, seeing your art, hearing your story, I realize I came here for a completely different reason. What reason? Rosalie asked, though her heart already knew the answer. Because I'm falling in love with you, Gabriel said, the words torn from him like a confession under torture. I have no idea what to do about it. Chapter 8. The kiss that changed everything. The admission hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they dared to cross. Gabriel had built his life on control, on calculated risks and measured outcomes. Love was chaos, unpredictable and dangerous to everything he had worked to achieve, but Rosalie stepped into that chaos willingly. Rising on her toes to close the distance between them, their lips met in a kiss that was tentative at first, then deeper as months of suppressed attraction finally found expression. Gabriel had kissed other women, but never like this. Never with the feeling that he was coming home to a place he hadn't known he was searching for. Rosalie fit against him perfectly, her softness complementing his strength, her warmth melting the ice he had carried for so long. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, overwhelmed by the intensity of what had just passed between them. This is complicated, Rosalie said, her hands still resting on his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart. Everything worthwhile is complicated, Gabriel replied, his arms tightening around her waist. The question is whether it's worth the complications. Before Rosalie could answer, her phone rang with the sharp, insistent tone that indicated an emergency call. Gabriel released her reluctantly as she moved to answer it. Miss Harper? The voice belonged to Henry Peterson, Gabriel's head of security, and the urgency in his tone made both Gabriel and Rosalie go rigid with alarm. Yes, Mr. Peterson. Is Mr. Blackwood with you? I've been trying to reach him and his phone appears to be turned off. Gabriel pulled out his phone, realizing he had indeed turned it off before coming to Rosalie's apartment, not wanting any interruptions. He's here, Rosalie said, handing Gabriel the phone. Peterson, what's the situation? Sir, there's been a break-in at the office. Someone accessed your computer and the company's servers. Preliminary reports suggest they were specifically targeting information about the AI development project. Gabriel's blood turned to ice. The AI project represented 2 years of research and development, millions of dollars in investment in the future direction of Blackwood Technologies. In the wrong hands, that information could destroy his company or make his competitors billions. How much was compromised? We're still assessing, but sir, there's something else. The security footage shows the intruder had an access card and knew the security protocols. This was an inside job. Gabriel closed his eyes, already knowing what Peterson would tell him next. The access card belonged to Richard Blackwood. Chapter 9. Family betrayal. The revelation hit Gabriel like a physical blow. He had always known his uncle resented him, had always suspected Richard would prefer to see him fail rather than succeed. But corporate espionage was a line he had never imagined his own family would cross. Sir Peterson's voice brought Gabriel back to the present. Lock down everything. Change all access codes and security protocols immediately. And Peterson? Yes, sir? Find my uncle. I want to know where he is and who he's been talking to. Gabriel hung up and turned to find Rosalie watching him with concern and something else determination. It was your uncle, she said. Wasn't a question. How did you know? The way he looked at you today. It's the questions he asked. And this. Rosalie moved to her computer and pulled up a series of documents she had been researching. I've been investigating your uncle's financial situation. Since this afternoon, he's deeper in debt than I initially realized, and he's been meeting regularly with executives from Meridian Tech. Gabriel stared at the information on her screen, feeling pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. Meridian Tech offered Harrison Industries that unrealistic deal because they knew they would have access to our AI technology. Your uncle promised them our research in exchange for enough money to cover his debts and a position in their company, Rosalie confirmed. But Gabriel, there's more. She pulled up another document, this one showing a series of financial transactions. Your uncle didn't just steal information tonight. He's been selling company secrets for months. Small things at first client lists, development timelines, strategic plans. Tonight was just the final heist. Gabriel felt a rage building inside, him unlike anything he had ever experienced. His uncle hadn't just betrayed the company. He had betrayed the legacy of Gabriel's father, the trust of every employee, the future they had all worked to build. "I have to go," Gabriel said, already. Reaching for his jacket. "Gabriel, wait." Rosalie caught his arm. "Don't confront him alone. If he's desperate enough to steal from family, there's no telling what else he might do." Gabriel looked down at her hand on his arm, drawing strength from her touch. "What are you suggesting? Let me help. I found this information and I might be able to find more. I can build a case that will not only stop him, but expose everyone he's been working with." The offer surprised Gabriel. Rosalie would be putting herself at risk, involving herself in a situation that could turn dangerous quickly. "This isn't your fight," Gabriel said softly. "Yes, it is." Rosalie's green eyes blazed with determination. "You gave me a chance when no one else would. You believed in my potential when I had stopped believing in it myself. And more than that, I care about you. I care about what you've built and what it means to you." Gabriel studied her face, seeing not just the beautiful woman who had captured his heart, but the ally he had never known he needed. "All right," he said finally. "We do this carefully, and we do it together." Neither of them could have predicted that Richard Blackwood was already 3 steps ahead, or that their decision to work together would put both of their lives in immediate danger. Chapter 10. The trap is set. The next morning brought deceptive calm to the Blackwood Technologies building. Gabriel arrived early, having spent most of the night with Rosalie planning their strategy to expose his uncle's betrayal. They had decided to set a trap, using false information about a new development project to lure Richard into revealing the full extent of his corporate espionage network. What they didn't know was that Richard had been monitoring Gabriel's communications since the security breach, and he was already preparing a counterstrike that would destroy everything Gabriel held dear. Rosalie sat at her desk, appearing to work on routine administrative tasks, while actually coordinating with Peterson's security team to trace Richard's communications and financial transactions. They had already identified 3 other companies that had been purchasing stolen Blackwood Technologies information through intermediaries. It was Harper. Gabriel called from his office, loud enough for anyone monitoring to hear. "Please prepare. The Henderson project files for the board meeting this afternoon. Make sure you include all the new quantum processing specifications." The Henderson project didn't exist, but Richard wouldn't know that. If he was still actively stealing information, he would try to access those files within hours. Rosalie played her part perfectly, responding with professional efficiency while secretly coordinating the digital honeypot they had prepared. Any attempt to access the fake Henderson project files would trigger alerts and begin tracing the intrusion back to its source. At 11:30, their trap worked exactly as planned. Richard's access codes attempted to breach the Henderson project database, and Peterson's team immediately began tracking the digital breadcrumbs back to their source. "We've got him," Peterson reported over Gabriel's secure line. "He's accessing the system from his home office, and the files are being simultaneously transmitted to external servers registered to shell companies." Controlled by Meridian Tech, Gabriel felt a grim satisfaction. They had the evidence they needed to destroy Richard's conspiracy and protect the company, but his satisfaction was short-lived. Sir Peterson's voice carried a new note of urgency. "We have a problem. Richard isn't alone. Our surveillance shows at least 3 other individuals at his residence, and they appear to be armed." The game had just escalated beyond corporate espionage into something far more dangerous. Chapter 11. The confrontation. Gabriel's first instinct was to call the FBI and let federal authorities handle the situation. Corporate espionage was a serious crime, and armed conspirators suggested the stakes had risen beyond simple theft of trade secrets. But Richard forced his hand by making the first move. "Gabriel," his uncle's voice came through the office speakerphone at exactly noon, smooth and confident despite being caught in an act of treason. "I believe you and I need to have a conversation." "I'm listening." Gabriel replied, gesturing ferociously to activate the recording system. Peterson had installed. Not over the phone, nephew. Face to face like family should. I'm sending you an address. Come alone and come quickly. You have exactly 1 hour. The line went dead, and Gabriel's secure phone immediately buzzed with a text message containing an address in Queen's Anne, abandoned warehouse district that had been scheduled for redevelopment, but remained empty due to legal disputes. It's obviously a trap, Peterson said when Gabriel called to inform him of the meeting. Sir, with respect, you cannot seriously be considering going there alone. I don't have a choice, Gabriel replied. If Richard is desperate enough to involve armed associates, there's no telling what he'll do next. He could disappear entirely, taking our stolen research with him, or he could escalate to even more dangerous tactics. Then let us handle this properly, Peterson argued. FBI, local police, full tactical support, and risk him destroying everything he's stolen out of spite? Gabriel shook his head. No, I need to face him directly, find out what he really wants, and end this before it gets worse. Rosalie, who had been listening to the conversation, stepped forward with determination in her green eyes. You're not going alone, she said simply. Absolutely not, Gabriel replied immediately. This is dangerous enough without putting you at risk. Gabriel, listen to me. Rosalie moved closer, speaking with quiet intensity. Your uncle specifically said to come alone because he wants you isolated and vulnerable, but he's not expecting me, and that gives us an advantage. What kind of advantage? Rosalie moved to her computer and pulled up architectural plans she had somehow obtained for the warehouse district. I've been researching this location since he called. The warehouse he chose has multiple entry points and sight lines that could provide tactical advantage if we plan this correctly. Gabriel stared at her in amazement. How did you get these plans, and how do you know about tactical advantages? For the first time since he had known her, Rosalie looked genuinely uncomfortable. There are things about my background I haven't told you, things I never thought would be relevant to this job. What things? Rosalie took a deep breath, as if preparing to reveal a secret she had guarded carefully. Before my father became an engineer, he was in the military. Special operations. He taught me things: observation skills, threat assessment, basic tactical thinking. I never thought I'd need those skills, but given our current situation, Gabriel felt another piece of the Rosalie Harper puzzle click into place. Her ability to read people, her quick thinking under pressure, her calm competence in crisis situations, it all made sense now. You're full of surprises, Gabriel said softly. I prefer to think of it as being prepared for unexpected situations, Rosalie replied with a small smile. And right now, we have an unexpected situation that requires both of us working together. Chapter 12. Into the Lion's Den, the warehouse district in Queens looked like a post-apocalyptic landscape, filled with empty buildings and broken dreams. Gabriel parked his car 2 blocks from the specified address, and he and Rosalie approached the meeting location with careful precision. Peterson and his security team were positioned at strategic points around the perimeter, ready to intervene if the situation escalated beyond Gabriel's control. But the plan was for Gabriel to handle the confrontation directly, gather in evidence of Richard's crimes, while Rosalie coordinated backup support from a concealed position. The warehouse Richard had chosen was a massive concrete structure that had once housed automotive parts but now stood empty except for dust and shadows. Gabriel entered through the main door exactly on time, while Rosalie slipped through a side entrance that would give her visual access to the meeting while keeping her hidden from Richard's associates. Punctual as always, Richard's voice echoed through the cavernous space. He stood in the center of the warehouse, no longer bothering to maintain the facade of respectable businessmen. 3 other men flanked him, their positions and bearing suggesting military or security backgrounds. Uncle Richard, Gabriel said, stopping about 20 feet away from the group. I have to admit, corporate espionage wasn't how I expected our family disagreements to be resolved. Richard laughed, a sound devoid of warmth or humor. Family? You've never treated me like family, Gabriel. You've treated me like an obstacle, to be managed, a problem to be contained. You've given me little choice, Gabriel replied. Every board meeting, every strategic decision. You've opposed me not because you disagreed with the direction, but because you resented not being in control. Your father promised me a partnership, Richard said, his composure cracking to reveal the bitterness beneath. David said we would build this company together, that there would be room for both Blackwood brothers at the top. And then he died, Gabriel said softly, and left the company to me because he trusted me to lead it properly. The words hit their target. Richard's face contorted with rage, and Gabriel realized his uncle's betrayal went deeper than greed or financial desperation. This was about recognition, about respect, about a lifetime of living in his older brother's shadow. He left it to you because you were always his favorite, Richard snarled. The golden boy who could do no wrong, while I was just the spare. Brother kept around for emergencies. So you decided to destroy what he built. I decided to take what should have been mine from the beginning. Richard gestured to one of his associates, who produced a tablet computer. Every secret, every innovation, every strategic advantage your company developed over the past 2 years, I've sold it all to the highest bidders. Gabriel felt a cold rage building in his chest, but he forced himself to remain calm. They needed Richard to confess to everything, to provide evidence that would ensure he faced the full consequences of his betrayal, including the AI research, Gabriel said, especially the AI research. Richard's smile was triumphant. Do you have any idea what that technology is worth? Meridian Tech paid me $15 million just for the preliminary algorithms. When they get the full development package, they'll pay another $30 million. You're destroying the future of American technological development, Gabriel said. That research could revolutionize everything from medical diagnostics to climate modeling. I don't care about the future, Richard replied. I care about getting what's mine. From her concealed position, Rosalie was recording everything on a device Peterson had provided. But she could also see something Gabriel couldn't. One of Richard's associates was moving to flank Gabriel's position, hand moving toward a concealed weapon. Chapter 13. The hidden truth. The situation deteriorated rapidly when Richard's associate drew his weapon, forcing Rosalie to abandon her concealed position and reveal herself to protect Gabriel. Gun! She shouted, emerging from behind a concrete pillar with surprising speed and tactical awareness. The warning gave Gabriel time to dive for cover as the warehouse erupted into chaos. Richard's associates were professionals, but they weren't, expecting resistance from someone with Rosalie's unconventional skill set. Peterson's security team breached the warehouse moments later, turning what had been a confrontation into a full tactical operation. In the ensuing confusion, Richard made a desperate attempt to escape, but Gabriel intercepted him near a side exit. It's over, Richard, Gabriel said, blocking his uncle's path to freedom. Why is it? Richard pulled out a smartphone and showed Gabriel the screen. One button, nephew, and everything your company has ever developed gets released to the public. Internet. Every patent, every trade secret, every strategic advantage you possess becomes worthless overnight. Gabriel stared at the device, realizing his uncle had prepared one final act of spite that could destroy Blackwood Technologies even if his conspiracy was exposed. It would destroy thousands of jobs, billions of dollars in value, years of research and development just to hurt me? To destroy you, Richard corrected, just like you destroyed my life. But before Richard could activate the data dump, Rosalie appeared behind him like a shadow, using skills her father had taught her years ago to disarm him with quick, precise movements that left him stunned and defenseless. Military training? Gabriel asked as Peterson's team secured Richard and his associates. Among other things, Rosalie replied, helping Gabriel to his feet. There's actually quite a bit about my background that I haven't mentioned. Chapter 14. The full truth later. In the safety of Gabriel's office with Richard in federal custody and the immediate crisis resolved, Gabriel finally learned the complete truth about the woman who had changed his life. My real name is Rosalie Harper, she began, settling into the chair across from his desk. But my father wasn't just an engineer. He was Colonel James Harper, United States Army Special Forces, and later a technical consultant for government intelligence agencies. Gabriel listened in amazement as Rosalie revealed the true scope of her background's specialized education in both technology and security. training in threat assessment and crisis management, and experience that went far beyond what any normal personal assistant could possess.